Good morning and welcome to the Ignition News. It is January 13th, 2026, and I've got a lot of stories to get to today. I really appreciate you following along. If you're not yet following on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform, I encourage you to please go ahead and click that subscribe button. It means a lot, and it keeps the show going for you, for us to be able to continue to bring truth, uncensored, and unfiltered news here on the Ignition News. Let's get into the stories today. The main theme of our stories today, accountability and who is coming to save us. Our show is sponsored today by Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise. So let's get on to the very first story of the day, featuring Ignite. Today, January 13th, 2026, we are happy to announce that we have launched the first episode of Season 2 of Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise. Here on the Ignition News and on the Ignite podcast, we are candidly not sure what is going to happen with the 2026 election. It is too difficult or too uncertain to really understand at this time if we will, in fact, have free and fair elections. But we can't wait for our government to come and save us. We can't wait for people to do the right thing. It is and always has been us. On Season 2 of Ignite, we are going to have an intense focus on what you can do to aggressively fight for your country. And in the first episode of Season 2, we talk about how to steal an election, not through any other means than perfectly legally, ethically, and by doing the things they don't want you to know about. Download Episode 1 of Season 2 of Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise. Now let's get to the main stories. Perhaps the most shocking story about accountability and corruption in the United States government to hit this week, and again, that's just this week, is what the President of the United States is doing to Fed Chair Jerome Powell. On Friday, January 10th, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with a grand jury subpoena threatening the criminal indictment of Federal Chair Jerome Powell. The reason? His testimony last June before the Senate Banking Committee about the $2.5 billion renovation of the Fed headquarters building. The real reason is because Powell will not lower interest rates as fast as the president demands. And Jerome Powell released an extraordinary statement on Sunday night. I'm going to read to you part of what he said because it is an unprecedented example of authoritarian overreach. Powell himself said, "This unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the federal buildings. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting the interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president." He continued, "This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead the monetary policy will be directed by the political pressure or intimidation." Let's be very clear about what's happening. The president has publicly attacked Powell for months because he hasn't slashed interest rates the way that Trump wants. President Trump, is uncharacteristically focused on interest rates because one of the tools of success for his last administration were the tailwinds of economic policy that essentially was the Fed charging almost no interest. That allowed access to cheap money and allowed access to what many people view as some of our best economic times. And the president foolishly thinks that if we just slash the interest rate, that's going to kick off the economy. But it's much more complex than that. The investigation is being overseen by Jeanine Pirro. Yes, the Fox News lady, Jeanine Pirro, who Trump appointed as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. On Monday, Pirro defended the investigation, claiming the Fed chair ignored their outreach and that they are using grand jury subpoenas as not a threat. She said the word indictment has come out of Mr. Powell's mouth, no one else's. That is gaslighting. When you serve someone with a grand jury subpoena, you're threatening indictment. That is what subpoenas mean. Here's what multiple DHS officials and former ICE agents are saying privately, according to reports. They say, "I don't recognize my agency anymore." And the backlash has been significant. Whether that's Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen, Alan Greenspan, or former Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson or Robert Rubin, they've all said in a joint letter that this action is showing how monetary policy is made in emerging markets with weak institutions with highly negative consequences for inflation and the functioning of their economics more broadly. In other words, they're saying the president is running this like a third world country now. Even Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly told people that he's unhappy with the decision and warned Trump that this will negatively impact markets. And here's the critical detail, by the way. Trump nominated Jerome Powell to the Fed chair in 2017. His term ends in May 2026, but his term as Fed governor doesn't end until 2028. So some analysts think that now Powell might stay on as a governor just to deprive Trump of another appointment. This is textbook authoritarian behavior, friends, but it's a good example of how to stand up to the bully. And if they can do this to the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and really, which is one of the most protected positions in government, they can do it to anyone. But that's not the last example today of people standing up to the president and this administration. Let's talk about what's happening at the Department of Justice. At least 6 senior prosecutors in the Civil Rights Division announced their resignations this week. These are not junior staff members, by the way. This is the chief of the section, the principal deputy chief, and the deputy chief, and the acting deputy chief, basically the entire leadership team of the unit that investigates police killings. They resigned because Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, decided there would be no civil rights investigation into the ICE agent killing of Renee Good. So let's repeat that. The Justice Department unit that specializes in investigating whether law enforcement officers improperly used deadly force was told they would not be investigating a case where a federal agent had shot an unarmed citizen 3 times through her car window. According to CBS News, career prosecutors in the criminal section offered to drop all of their other work to help investigate the Minneapolis shooting, and they were told no. The Justice Department initially contemplated treating this as a color of law civil rights investigation into excessive use of force. Then it changed course. Now it's being treated as an assault on a federal officer, meaning Jonathan Ross, the shooter, the murderer, is considered the victim rather than the perpetrator. Think about that framing. Think about what they're trying to do here. This is the second mass resignation at the DOJ since Trump returned to office. In February, 5 leaders and supervisors of the Public Integrity Section resigned rather than comply with Trump appointee in orders to dismiss the bribery case against then New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Kristen Clark, who led the Civil Rights Division during the Biden administration, said, investigating officials to determine if they broke the law, defied policy, failed to de-escalate, and resorted to deadly force without bias is one of the Civil Rights Division's most solemn duties. Prosecutors of the Civil Rights Division have for decades been the nation's leading expert in this work. Here's what this means in practice. The FBI blocked Minnesota state investigators from accessing evidence. The DOJ Civil Rights Division was told to stand down, and the investigation is now being run by the same administration that immediately declared that the shooting was justified before any investigation took place. What that means is this is not an investigation. They are not investigating the death of Renee Good. They are treating it as Renee Good committing a crime against Jonathan Ross. That should terrify you because, by the way, these are the people who prosecuted, but these same prosecutors above, they're the people who prosecuted the officers who killed George Floyd. These are the experts. They hold the most esteemed place in law enforcement, and they're being forced out because they just wanted to investigate what happened. They may have determined that this individual had done nothing wrong, but what's happened is the administration has strong-armed the entire thing. And really what happens in that instance is people stop trusting the justice system. In a rule of law, when there is no law, what happens next? Speaking of ICE agents, let's get to Section 3. I do want to remind you today's show is brought to you by Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. Ignite is available Season 2, Episode 1, How to Steal an Election. Download it today, January 13th. ICE agents, by the way, well, according to Ken Klippenstein, he's got a scoop out here. Leaked internal documents of the Homeland Security Agency obtained by journalist Ken Klippenstein reveal that ICE agents are terrified. The documents urge agents to be mindful of operational security and officer safety. This is, for example, when entering and leaving their hotel, they're told to be mindful of what you post to social media, to turn off your location settings and set pages to private. They're talking about their social media pages. Border Patrol is struggling to find agents willing to volunteer for their Minneapolis operation. One document requested 200 additional Border Patrol agents and 100 processing coordinators. An agent told Klippenstein, "We do have personnel, but some just don't want to go." And here's the key quote. Here's the key quote from an unnamed Border Patrol agent about who's to blame. This is regarding Renee video. "There is a video and she just lied." That agent is talking about Kristi Noem, who called Renee Good's killing an act of domestic terrorism. Claims obviously contradicted by the video evidence. A senior Homeland Security official told Klippenstein, "There's genuine fear that indeed ICE's heavy-handedness and the rhetoric from Washington is creating a condition where the officers' lives are in danger rather than the other way around." So let's read through that again. A senior DHS official is saying Trump and Noem's rhetoric is actually the one putting ICE agents in danger. The Daily Beast spoke with 2 agents who recently left ICE's Homeland Security investigations because of how the job has changed under Trump. They said they're terrified of the impact this is having on the force and their former colleagues. One ICE agent told the Daily Beast that drivers are increasingly, quote, making a gun sign with their hands as they pass ICE patrol. That is the level of public hostility that ICE agents are facing now. And of course, polling shows many Americans now want to see ICE abolished entirely. But current and former DHS officials know that what happened to Renee Good was not an act of domestic terrorism. They know that Kristi Noem lied. And now they're watching their colleagues get sent into hostile territory based on lies told by their own leadership. This is what happens when you politicize law enforcement. This is why trust is eroding in these institutions. When you force people to defend something that's indefensible, the institution starts to eat itself apart. And so it is not people in Minneapolis that are making ICE not safe. By the way, abolish ICE. It's the lies that are being told by Kristi Noem. This is an unnecessary escalation. We all need to turn the temperature down, but Kristi Noem is pouring gas on an already hot fire. Segment 4. Greenland. Welcome, everybody. If you're not yet following on the show, please consider following us on your Spotify or your favorite platform. Trump continues threatening military action against Greenland. On Friday, he told reporters, we're going to do something on Greenland whether they like it or not. Because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. He said, I would like to make a deal, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. That's the president of the United States, everybody, threatening a military action against a NATO ally. Greenland has about 57,000 people. It is obviously strategically located in the Arctic. It has minerals, and we do have a military base there. The White House did confirm they're actively discussing a plan to buy Greenland, according to Reuters. Trump has discussed sending payments to Greenlanders ranging from $10,000 to $100,000 per person to convince them to secede from Denmark. Greenlanders have repeatedly said they're not interested. Greenland's prime minister and party leaders released a joint statement saying, we do not want to be Americans. We do not want to be Danes. We want to be Greenlanders. The future of Greenland must be decided by the Greenlandic people. Not a complicated thing, by the way. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he doesn't think anyone's seriously considering military action, and he said in the Congress that they were certainly not. But Vice President J.D. Vance defended the administration's position, saying, we take the president of the United States seriously. This is obviously unprecedented. It's also stupid. We are not solving the problems of the American people by going and invading other foreign countries, let alone threatening a NATO ally. The dissolution of NATO would make us all less safe, and everyone knows it. Let's get into segment 5. Some accountability is on the horizon. Thanks, everybody, for following the Ignition News. This is Tuesday, January 13th, and former Special Counsel Jack Smith is set to publicly testify in front of the House Judiciary Committee in less than 10 days, January 22nd specifically. Smith testified privately to the committee in December for more than 8 hours. He's been publicly pushing to publicly testify, and now he's getting his chance. In his closed-door testimony, Smith told lawmakers that Trump was the most culpable and most responsible person for the January 6th attack. And he maintained that his team had proof beyond a reasonable doubt in both cases that Trump was guilty of these charges. Smith vigorously rejected claims that his investigations were politically motivated or influenced by the president, President Joe Biden. He said the decision to bring charges against President Trump was mine, but the basis for 9 of those charges rests entirely with President Trump and his action. In other words, I'm not the reason that President Trump was investigated. President Trump is the reason that President Trump was investigated. Ranking member Jamie Raskin said, even with many hours of private testimony, Republicans could not lay a glove on Jack Smith, his evidence, or his case. This upcoming hearing is a win for truth-seeking Americans and yet another looming humiliation for Donald Trump and congressional Republicans. Smith's lawyer, Lenny Brewer, said Jack has been clear for months he's ready and willing to answer questions in a public hearing about his investigation into President Trump's alleged unlawful efforts to overturn the 2020 election. I say, go for it, Jack. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear what you have to say. Of course, we saw with our own eyes what happened on January 6th and the months following the 2020 election, just like we saw with our own eyes, of course, on early January this year with Renee Good. We have to stop believing the lies of this administration and start believing the truth of our eyes. Stop believing the lies. Start believing your eyes. And Trump can't stop this, by the way. Smith doesn't work for him anymore. Smith finished his investigation, he released his report, and then he resigned. He is a private citizen, and private citizens can tell the truth. So how do all of these stories piece together? Well, Trump's Justice Department is criminally investigating the Fed chair for not lowering rates fast enough. 6 senior DOJ prosecutors resigned because they were blocked from investigating a federal agent who killed an American citizen. ICE agents are terrified because their own leadership lied about what they did. Trump is threatening military action against NATO, and Jack Smith is about to publicly testify about Trump's crime. This is the framework and the architecture of autocracy. You break down institutions, you weaponize the justice system, you cover up abuses of power, you expand military aggression, and you try to silence the people that actually can hold you accountable. But here's also what's happening. Fed chairs are pushing back, career prosecutors are protesting, agents are refusing to go along with lies, and our European allies are standing firm. Jack Smith's about to tell the American people exactly what the president did. And we're going to cover Jack Smith's testimony for you here on the Ignition News. And friends, the system is under attack. These are dramatic and scary times, but it's not gone yet. The public testimony on January 22nd matters. Watch it with us. Share it. We need to make sure that people remember what actually happened, not the erased truth that this administration is trying to perpetrate. That's it for the show today. This is the Ignition News. Stay tuned and stay vigilant, everyone. Thanks for following the Ignition News. Do us a favor, follow the show on Spotify, share it with a friend or family member, and we'll see you back, by the way, for the Ignition News on January 14th. Welcome to the Ignition News, your unfiltered, uncensored source for the actual truth in what is happening in the United States of America and around the world. We are not bought by the billionaires. We are here to be your source of truth in a time where truth matters more than it ever has. Be sure to follow along with your favorite platform on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Substack. Let's get busy with the truth. Welcome to the Ignition News. Let's ignite.